Imagine a world where ancient prophecies aren't just dusty words on a page, but a mirror to our reality. Picture this: towering empires of the West, America, Europe, ruling the globe with iron fists, their wealth dripping in the blood of conquest. What if I told you this isn't just power, but destiny unfolding? The book of Revelation whispers of a beast, a force of dominion rising in the last days. Could these white nations, forged in war and imperialism, be its modern face? Now, rewind to Babylon, golden, corrupt, unbreakable. History says it fell, but what if it didn't? What if it morphed into the West we know, its legacy alive in every skyscraper, every slave ship's echo? And then there's Gog and Magog, nations of chaos, clashing in the end times. Russia's tanks roll into Ukraine as we speak. Coincidence or prophecy? Dig deeper. Race threads through this tale. White empires of Japheth's line, black nations as the enduring remnant. Today, unrest brews. Empires tremble. The oppressed stir. Is this the final battle brewing? Armageddon's drumbeat in our headlines? Stick with me. The truth might be closer than you think, and it's about to shake everything you believe. Let's dive into a story that might just turn everything you know upside down. Picture this: the great white empires of the modern world, America, Europe, the titans of the West, sprawling across the globe like giants casting long, unyielding shadows. Their flags wave high. Their economies hum with the clink of coins. Their militaries roar with the thunder of war. They've shaped history with a relentless hand, through conquest, through wealth, through an imperialism that's painted the map in their colors. But hold on. What if this isn't just the march of progress we've been sold? What if this is something ancient, something foretold, something chillingly deliberate? What if these nations, these shining beacons of power, are the modern-day fulfillment of a prophecy written thousands of years ago? Let's pull back the curtain. In the book of Revelation, there's a figure that looms large: the beast, a terrifying force, a ruler of nations, a symbol of dominion that grips the earth in the final days. Its rise isn't subtle. It's bold, commanding, undeniable. Sound familiar? Look at America. The land of opportunity, yes, but also the land of endless wars, drone strikes, and a dollar that dictates global trade. Look at Europe. Cradles of democracy, sure, but also the architects of colonial empires that bled continents dry. These aren't just superpowers. They're systems of control, flexing their might through aircraft carriers and stock markets alike. Could this be the beast staring back at us, not with horns and fire, but with skyscrapers and sanctions? Think about it. The West's dominance didn't come from nowhere. It's built on centuries of ambition, crusades that carved up the Middle East, fleets that crossed oceans to claim new worlds, factories that churned while others starved. This isn't just history. It's a pattern of taking, ruling, reshaping. The beast in Revelation doesn't just conquer with swords. It seduces with wealth. It binds with chains of influence. Doesn't that echo in the way these nations operate? Hollywood exports dreams, while Wall Street pulls strings. NATO flexes muscle, while trade deals lock poorer countries in place. Its power so vast, it feels almost biblical. But let's push deeper. What makes this prophecy hit harder is its scope. The beast isn't a lone tyrant. It's a system, a coalition of forces that spans the earth. America and Europe don't stand alone. They're intertwined, a transatlantic web of alliances and agendas. From the ashes of World War II, they rose together, rebuilding, rearming, reasserting. The Cold War pitted them against rivals, but they emerged victorious, their way of life crowned supreme. Today, they dictate terms, climate talks, human rights, technology, while their past sins linger. Slavery's scars, indigenous graves, stolen lands. Is this just geopolitics, or is it destiny unfolding in real time? I know what you're thinking. Prophecy feels like a stretch. We're taught to see these nations as flawed but noble, not as harbingers of apocalypse. Yet the signs keep nagging. The Bible speaks of a power that deceives, that thrives on pride, that crushes the weak. Look at the wealth gap. Billionaires soar, while millions scrape by. Look at the wars. Endless, profitable, justified with grand words. Look at the arrogance, the assumption that their way is the only way. It's hard to shake the feeling that something bigger is at play. So, stay with me. This isn't about fear, it's about seeing. What if the empires we cheer for, the ones we live in, are more than they seem? What if they're players in a cosmic drama, stepping into roles written long before their first ships sailed? The white empires of today might just be the beast's latest mask, and that's a truth worth wrestling with. Let's rewind the clock and step into the shimmering sands of Babylon, an empire that once gleamed like a jewel in the ancient world. Picture it. Towering ziggurats piercing the sky, streets alive with the clink of gold coins, palaces dripping with opulence. Babylon wasn't just a place, it was a symbol. Wealth beyond measure, corruption that festered in the shadows, tyranny that crushed nations underfoot. The Bible paints it vividly, a city drunk on power, a harlot cloaked in scarlet, reveling in excess, while the enslaved toiled beneath its weight. History tells us Babylon fell. The Persians stormed its gates in 539 BC, and its glory crumbled into dust, or so we're told. But what if that's not the whole story? What if Babylon didn't vanish? What if it simply slipped into a new skin, a new name, a new age? Look at the Western world today. America, Europe. Their skylines glitter with steel and glass. Their economies pulse with unimaginable wealth. But beneath the shine, there's a shadow. The transatlantic slave trade dragged millions across oceans, chaining them to plantations for profit. Colonization stretched its greedy hands across continents, stripping lands and peoples bare. These aren't just footnotes in history. They're the heartbeat of a system that mirrors Babylon's DNA. Exploitation dressed up as progress. Power hoarded by the few, while the many suffer. Isn't it eerie how the echoes linger? The stock markets hum with the same lust for gold that once filled Babylonian coffers. The wars waged for oil, for dominance, feel like the conquests of old, just with better weapons. But let's dig deeper. Babylon wasn't just about wealth, it was about control. It built systems to keep itself aloft, to silence dissent, to bend the world to its will. Sound familiar? Look at the modern West. Corporations pull strings behind governments. Media spins narratives to keep us docile. Economic inequality yawns wider every year, a chasm between the elite and the rest. The spirit of Babylon didn't die. It adapted. It traded mud bricks for skyscrapers, chariots for jets, scrolls for algorithms. The tyranny softened its edges, learned to smile for the cameras. But it's still there, lurking in tax havens, in prison cells packed with the poor, in the boots stomping out resistance. And yet, there's more. Babylon was a seductress, luring nations into its web. Today, the West exports its culture, Hollywood, fast food, democracy wrapped in shiny packaging. It's a soft power, but power nonetheless. Nations bend to its influence, adopting its ways, bowing to its might. Isn't that Babylonian too? A legacy of domination, not through swords alone, but through ideas, through trade, through the promise of a better life that often turns to ash for those on the margins. So, here's the question that keeps me up at night. Did Babylon ever really fall? Or did it just scatter its seeds across the Atlantic, letting them bloom into the empires we salute today? The wealth, the corruption, the imperialism, it's all there, staring us in the face. This isn't just history repeating, it's history evolving. The Western world carries Babylon's torch, burning bright and fierce, and we're all living in its glow. But if this is true, if Babylon lives on, what does that mean for us? Are we complicit in its sins? Are we blind to its chains? Stay with me, because this story's far from over, and the next chapter might just change how you see everything. Let's dive into a prophecy that feels like it's ripped from today's headlines: Gog and Magog. These names, ancient and mysterious, tumble out of the Bible like a riddle, begging to be solved. In Scripture, they're nations, shadowy powers led by forces of darkness, destined to ignite chaos in the last days. The book of Ezekiel paints them as a storm gathering on the horizon, a coalition of evil marching under a banner of destruction. Revelation echoes this, hinting at a final clash that shakes the earth. Now, hold that image in your mind and turn your eyes to the world we're living in. Does it feel far-fetched, or does it feel eerily close? Picture this. Russian tanks rumble across Ukraine's borders. Smoke rises from shattered cities. Mothers clutch their children in bomb shelters, while world leaders trade threats like chess moves. The news calls it geopolitics, a power struggle, a territorial spat. But step back. Squint a little. Could this be more than just another war? Could this be a thread in that ancient tapestry of Gog and Magog? The Bible doesn't give us GPS coordinates, but it describes nations stirred by pride, greed, and a thirst for dominance. Sound familiar? Russia's aggression isn't happening in a vacuum. Alliances shift, tensions simmer with the West, and the air crackles with something bigger. Let's peel this back further. Gog and Magog aren't just about one war. They're a symbol of chaos unleashed. Think about the ripple effects. Ukraine's fields burn, but the shockwaves hit global food supplies. Gas prices spike, protests flare, economies wobble. It's not just a regional fight. It's a spark that could light a larger fire. The prophecy speaks of nations gathered for battle, drawn into a conflict that spirals beyond control. Now look around. China watches from the east, flexing its own might. The US and NATO flex back. Proxy wars bubble in corners of the globe. Is this the gathering storm the prophets saw? But here's where it gets gripping. Gog and Magog aren't random players. They're led by something sinister, a force steering them toward ruin. In today's terms, what drives these conflicts? Power, oil, revenge, or something deeper, something spiritual we can't quite name. I'm not saying Putin's got a demon on speed dial, but the ferocity of this war, the way it pulls the world into its orbit, it feels like more than human ambition. The Bible warns of deception in the end times, of nations blinded by their own fury. Watch the footage. Soldiers marching, missiles soaring, leaders doubling down. Does it feel like clarity or chaos? And yet, there's a twist. Prophecy isn't just doom, it's a signpost. If this is Gog and Magog playing out, it means we're not drifting aimlessly. We're on a path. The end times narrative promises that chaos doesn't win forever. These wars, these powers, they rise, they rage, but they fall. Think of Ukraine's defiance, its people standing firm against the odds. Think of the voices worldwide calling for peace, for justice. That's the counterpoint to the darkness, a flicker of resistance that prophecy hints will grow. So, lean in. This isn't just history or scripture, it's now. Russia's moves, the world's response, the undercurrents of unrest, they could be clues. Gog and Magog aren't dead names. They might be alive in our time, marching across our screens. The question is, are we awake enough to see it? Are we brave enough to ask what it means? This isn't the end of the story. It's the spark. Let's keep watching. Let's dive into something that might make you sit up straight. Race, woven deep into the fabric of apocalyptic prophecy. It's a thread that's been there all along, subtle yet undeniable, and it's time we pull it apart. The Bible doesn't shy away from lineage, Noah's sons, their descendants, their destinies. Japheth, one of those sons, is said to have fathered the peoples who spread across Europe. Think about that for a second. Those ancient tribes, those wandering clans, could they be the ancestors of the white nations we know today? America, Britain, France, Germany. Nations that rose to power, their sails catching the winds of conquest, their flags planted on every corner of the earth. In prophecy, these descendants of Japheth often appear as forces of wealth, dominion, and, here's where it gets chilling, sometimes evil. Could these modern white empires, with their skyscrapers and stock markets, be the very powers Scripture warned us about? Picture the history. It's not a gentle story. The transatlantic slave trade, millions torn from their homes, shackled, shipped across oceans. Colonization, lands seized, cultures crushed, all in the name of progress. Genocides that wiped out entire peoples, leaving only whispers of their existence. These aren't just footnotes. They're the backbone of white empire building. The wealth of London, the might of Washington. How much of it was forged in blood? Now, hold that thought and flip to Revelation. The beast, a figure of tyranny, seducing the world with its power. The nations that bow to it, are they these same ones, their hands stained with centuries of domination? It's a question that gnaws at you once it takes root. But let's not stop there. Race in prophecy isn't a one-sided tale. If white nations might stand as the villains in this cosmic drama, what about the others? The Bible speaks of a final battle, a clash of good and evil, and it's not hard to imagine who's been on the receiving end of that evil for generations. Black nations, brown peoples, descendants of Ham and Shem perhaps, carry a different legacy. Oppression didn't break them, it tempered them. Think of the resilience in African kingdoms, the defiance in the face of slavery, the quiet strength of communities that refused to be erased. Scripture mentions a remnant, a people who endure through the fire. Could this be their role? Not just victims, but warriors in the shadows, waiting for their moment. Zoom out. The world stage today feels like a chessboard, doesn't it? White empires still hold the most pieces, military bases dotting the globe, economies that dictate terms. Yet cracks are showing. Protests erupt. Voices rise. The oppressed aren't silent anymore. Prophecy hints at a turning point. Armageddon, where the mighty fall and the downtrodden rise. Imagine it. The descendants of Japheth, bloated with pride, facing the remnant they underestimated. It's not just a battle of swords or bombs. It's a reckoning of history itself. This isn't about pointing fingers for the sake of it. It's about seeing the bigger picture. Race isn't a side note in prophecy. It's a lens. It forces us to ask, who's been writing the story we live in? Who's been cast as the hero, the villain, the forgotten? The white nations of Japheth's line might have built empires, but at what cost? And the peoples they've trampled, could they be the ones Scripture says will stand when the dust settles? It's a haunting thought, one that lingers long after you turn away. The end times, if they're near, won't care about our comfort zones. They'll demand we look at the truth, raw, unfiltered, and staring us in the face. What do you see when you look? Let's pause here and dive deeper into something that demands our attention. The role of Black nations in resisting the tide of empire. Picture this: a world where the glittering thrones of white imperial powers cast long, suffocating shadows. America, Europe. These giants have marched across history, their boots stained with the earth of conquered lands, their treasuries swollen with the spoils of exploitation. For centuries, they've shaped the narrative, painted themselves as the heroes of progress. But beneath their towering banners, another story brews, a story of defiance, of strength, of a people who refuse to break. That's where Black nations and communities step into the spotlight, not as footnotes, but as a force that could shift the very axis of prophecy. Think about it. In the Bible, there's this idea of a remnant, a group that endures, that holds fast through the storms of oppression. Could this be them? Look at the history. Enslaved, uprooted, scattered. Black peoples have faced the worst of humanity's greed. The transatlantic slave trade wasn't just a chapter. It was a centuries-long crucible, designed to crush spirits and erase identities. Yet, it didn't. From the shores of Africa to the fields of the Americas, resilience took root. Songs of sorrow became anthems of hope. Chains were broken, not just by force, but by a will that refused to bow. That's not weakness. That's power of a different kind. Now, let's widen the lens. Black nations today, across Africa, the Caribbean, and beyond, carry that same fire. They've stood against colonial empires, fought for independence, rebuilt from the ashes of exploitation. Think of Haiti, throwing off French shackles in a revolution that shook the world. Or Ghana, stepping into freedom as a beacon for a continent. These aren't just historical footnotes. They're testaments to a strength that defies the odds. And in Black communities worldwide, that legacy lives on. From civil rights marches to voices rising against injustice today, there's a thread of wisdom, of survival, that runs deep. Contrast that with the white empires we've talked about. Their power is loud, built on cannons, gold, and systems of control. But the strength of Black nations, it's quieter, fiercer, forged in the furnace of hardship. Scripture hints at this dichotomy. The beast rises with pomp and dominion, but the remnant endures through faith and grit. Could Black peoples be that remnant? The ones who stand when the empires crumble? It's not hard to imagine. Their story isn't one of conquest, but of overcoming, a counterpoint to the imperialist roar. Let's take it further. Imagine the end times, as Revelation paints them. The beast, let's say it's these white powers, tightens its grip. Wars rage, Gog and Magog clash. The world trembles. But in the chaos, who resists? Who holds the line? Picture Black communities, long oppressed, rising as a tide against the system that's choked them for so long. Not with armies or wealth, but with the unyielding spirit that's carried them through centuries. It's a vision that flips the script. The oppressed don't just survive. They challenge, they endure, they reshape. This isn't just history or prophecy. It's a call to see the world differently. Black nations and peoples aren't on the sidelines. They're central, a force of resistance against the beast's dominion. Their strength isn't borrowed, it's earned. And as the world shifts, empires faltering, tensions rising, could they be the ones to tip the scales? It's a question worth asking, a story worth telling. So, listen closely. This isn't the end of their role, it's just the beginning. Let's dive into the sixth point, signs of the end times in contemporary politics. Picture the world right now, It's March 6th, 2025, and the air feels thick with tension. Scroll through your newsfeed, and what do you see? Rising clashes between the West and China, trade wars morphing into something darker, threats whispered across borders. It's not just politics. It's a chessboard of power, teetering on the edge. The Bible warns of nations rising against nations in the last days, and I can't help but wonder, are we watching that unfold? The stakes feel biblical, don't they? Every missile test, every diplomatic snub, it's like a drumbeat counting down to something massive. But it's not just the big players. Look closer. Protests erupt in cities, across the globe, people marching, voices roaring against racial injustice. In America, the ghosts of slavery and segregation still haunt the streets. In Europe, migrants plead for refuge while walls go up. The cries for justice echo louder every day, and Scripture speaks of this too. Civil unrest, the oppressed rising up as empires falter. Think about it. The book of Revelation paints a picture of chaos before the end, a world splitting at the seams. Does that sound familiar? The anger, the division, the sense that something's breaking. It's all there, staring us in the face. And then there's the economy. Billionaires soar higher, while families scrape by. The gap widens, a chasm swallowing hope. In the West, wealth glitters like Babylon's gold, but it's built on shaky ground. Stock markets jitter, debts pile up, and whispers of collapse creep in. The Bible talks of empires falling, their riches turning to dust. Look at history. Rome, Greece, Babylon itself, all crumbled when their greed outgrew their foundations. Today, we're hooked on excess, fast fashion, tech empires, oil barons. But what happens when the machine stops? When the dollar wavers? When the shelves empty? It's not hard to imagine a spark igniting the whole powder keg. Geopolitics ties it all together. Russia's war in Ukraine rages on, a wound that won't heal. The Middle East simmers, old rivalries flaring anew. Even the climate screams warnings. Floods, fires, storms tearing through like judgments. Revelation mentions signs in the heavens and earth. And here we are, watching nature revolt. Coincidence? Or a signal we've ignored too long? The West postures as invincible, but cracks show. Alliances shift, trust erodes. It's a house of cards trembling in the wind. What pulls me in deepest, though, is the human pulse beneath it all. People aren't just statistics. They're the heartbeat of this story. The single mom marching for her kid's future. The refugee crossing borders for a chance. The worker striking against a system that forgets him. These aren't random acts. They're a chorus, a swelling tide. Scripture says the end times will lift the lowly, that the proud will stumble. Could this be it? The powerful clutch their thrones, but the ground shakes. The oppressed, the overlooked, they're waking up, and their voices thunder. So, lean in. This isn't distant theology. It's now. The unrest, the wars, the inequality. It's a neon sign flashing. Pay attention. The end times might not be tomorrow, but the warnings ripple through today. Are we too distracted to see it? Too comfortable to care? The signs are here, woven into our politics, our streets, our world. The question is, will we listen before the final note plays? Let's dive into the final chapter of this story, the climactic showdown, the ultimate reversal of power. Picture this: the world as we know it, teetering on the edge, the air thick with tension, the ground trembling beneath the weight of history. The book of Revelation paints a vivid scene: Armageddon, the last battle, where the forces of good and evil collide in a blaze of reckoning. But what if this isn't some distant fantasy? What if the pieces are already falling into place, right here, right now? The video suggests something electrifying. This final war might not just be about angels and demons, but about people, real people, rising from the ashes of oppression to topple the towering beast system of white supremacy and domination. And when that dust settles, a new order could emerge, one where the downtrodden take the reins. Think about it. For centuries, white empires, America, Europe, the heirs of colonial might, have sat on thrones built from the bones of the exploited. Their flags waved over slave ships. Their wealth grew from stolen lands. Their laws crushed voices that dared to cry out. The beast, in all its glittering arrogance, has ruled unchallenged. But Scripture hints at a twist. The oppressed, black and brown peoples, the descendants of resilience, aren't just victims in this tale. They're the wild card, the remnant that endures. Imagine the scene. Protests swelling in the streets, fists raised against injustice, voices roaring louder than cannons. From the plantations of yesterday to the cities of today, a fire burns, a fire that says, no more. Look at the signs around us. Racial injustice isn't a footnote. It's a scream that echoes across the globe. In America, names like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor ignite movements. In Africa, nations shake off the ghosts of colonial chains. These aren't isolated sparks. They're a gathering storm. The Bible speaks of the meek inheriting the earth, of the last becoming first. Could this be it? Could the oppressed, long trampled under the boots of empire, be the ones to turn the tide? The video dares us to see it. Armageddon not as a cosmic explosion, but as a human uprising, a revolt against the systems that crowned themselves gods. Now, zoom out. The West flexes its muscles, but cracks show. Economic inequality festers. Billionaires soar while millions starve. Tensions with China simmer, a chessboard of power tilting toward chaos. Russia's wars churn blood into the soil. These aren't just headlines. They're tremors, warnings that the mighty might fall. And who stands ready when they do? The communities forged in struggle, black, brown, indigenous, peoples who've known the whip, the chain, the ghetto, yet still rise. They're not waiting for permission. They're claiming their place, their strength, a quiet thunder building toward a deafening roar. This isn't just about revenge. It's about justice. It's about flipping the script. The beast, with its pale hands gripping the world, might face its end, not from a heavenly army, but from the very people it sought to break. Picture the moment. Empires crumbling, their marble halls reduced to rubble, and from that ruin, a new dawn breaking. The oppressed don't just survive. They lead, they heal, they build. The video leaves us on this edge, hearts pounding, minds racing. Is this the final battle? Are we witnessing the rise of the remnant, the birth of a world reborn? The stage is set, the players are moving. All that's left is to watch and wonder. What side of history will we stand on when the fire comes? As I sit with these ideas, I can't help but feel a shiver of awe and unease. The thought that the empires we live under, the headlines we scroll past, might be echoes of ancient prophecies. It's staggering. I grew up seeing the West as a beacon of progress, but now I wonder, what if it's a modern Babylon, cloaked in glass and steel? The weight of history presses down, slavery, conquest, inequality, and I'm left asking, how blind have I been to the patterns? Yet, there's hope too. The resilience of black nations, the remnant that endures, stirs something in me. It's a reminder that power isn't the full story. Survival, wisdom, resistance are just as real. The takeaway here is profound. Our world isn't random. Geopolitics, race, inequality. They might be threads in a tapestry woven long ago. The beast, Gog and Magog, Armageddon. They're not just fairy tales. They could be warnings, urging us to look deeper. We're not just spectators. We're part of this narrative, whether we see it or not. So, what now? I challenge you. Don't let this end here. Dig into these prophecies yourself. Revelation, the stories of Japheth, the legacy of Babylon. Question what you've been taught about power, about race, about history. Talk about it, over coffee, with friends, in quiet moments alone. The truth doesn't hide. It waits for us to seek it. If the end times are near, or even if they're not, understanding our place in this story matters. Let's not be passive. Let's wrestle with these ideas, shine light into the shadows, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to shape what comes next. The choice is ours. What will you do with it?